Today we are going to talk about our upgrade for Counter Blitz, the new banned Precon from Final Fantasy sets. We are both huge fans of the IP, my personal favorite is Final Fantasy VI and Nuno's is 10. Since it's the case, we decided to do an upgraded deck tech for this Precon, but instead of using tidus, Yuna's Guardian, we decided to use Yuna Grand Summoner as a commander. We also tried to keep the deck as thematic as possible, however there are cards you could add to boost the power of this deck even further. But before we start, we would like to mention MythAtom. MythAtom is a US online store that sells MTG merch as well as jewelry inspired by iconic fantasy realms. We have received this Sword of Feast and Famine and this Colossus Hammer keychains. So if you want to take a look, check out mythatom.com for more information. Yuna Grand Summoner is a 4-mana banned 1/5 human cleric with the following text. Grand Summon. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. When you next cast a creature spell this turn, that creature enters with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever another permanent you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, if it had 1 or more counters on it, you may put that number of +1/+1 counters on target creature. There are multiple ways to build this deck. We decided to focus on the counter synergy. Important to note that our commander's first ability can stack, meaning if you can tap Yuna 4 mana and find a way to untap her and tap her again, the next creature spell we would cast in that turn would enter with 2 +1/+1 counters instead of 1. Because of this, our commander is a mana source, a great source of value as well as a win condition, like we are about to see later on. Her second ability is a better Death's Presence, allowing our counters to jump around and making it very difficult for our opponents to deal with our permanents. Another important part of this ability is that Yuna doesn't care about the type of counters the permanent has when it is put into the graveyard, meaning the new summon cards work very well in this deck, as well as other permanents that naturally have counters on them. Now that you have an idea of how our commander works, let's check creatures. Auron, Venerated Guardian. A 4-mana 2/5 human spirit samurai with vigilance and, whenever Auron attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. When you do, exile target creature defending player controls with power less than Auron's power until Auron leaves the battlefield. A very defensive card that grows fast, especially with Yuna on board. Chocobo Knights, a 4-mana 3/3 human knight with, whenever you attack, creatures you control with counters on them gain double strike until end of turn. This card works a little bit as a finisher, as you normally only play it when you're about to win the game. Otherwise, this card is a clear kill on sight. Evolution Sage, the first card on the deck that is not Final Fantasy themed, and also a mandatory card in decks that are counters related, with landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, proliferate. Fathom Mage, a 1/1 with evolve for 4 mana with, whenever a +1/+1 counter is put on this creature, you may draw cards. A great source of card draw, as this deck doesn't have too many sources, but the ones that are on the deck can draw a lot of cards. Forgotten Ancient, another classic staple in this type of decks. Gata and Luzu, a 3-mana 1/1 with flash and, when Gata and Luzu enters, choose target creature you control. If damage will be dealt to that creature this turn, prevent that damage and put that many +1/+1 counters on it. This card is great. Not only does it protect our commander, Gata and Luzu are also part of the new Infinite combo that comes on this deck, even if you don't change any cards, but more on that later. Incubation Druid and Kami of Whispered Hopes. 2 great mana sources, but at the same time, 2 combo potential enablers, as these 2 cards and Yuna can produce infinite mana with cards like Freed from the Real, but more on this later. Kimari Valiant Guardian, the blue mage dragoon of the team, a 4-mana 3/3 with vigilance and, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Kimari and tap target creature and opponent controls. Then you may have Kimari become a copy of that creature, except its name is Kimari Valiant Guardian and it has vigilance and disability. This card is not the most powerful on the deck, but we couldn't kick Kimahri off the party, even though if you play Final Fantasy X, that is exactly what happens to Kimahri all the time. Lord Giscalguado, a 2-mana Spirit Cleric with flying, and at the beginning of each end step, if you put a counter on a creature this turn, investigate. A simple card, but also good for card advantage. Lulu Stern Guardian, a 3-mana 2/3 human wizard with whenever an opponent attacks you, choose target creature attacking you. Put a stun counter on that creature. But also 4 mana proliferates. It's important to note that stun counters can stack, so Lulu's first ability works really well with her activated ability, allowing us to lock a creature if we wish for a little bit, or if we can produce infinite mana for the rest of the game, putting a million stun counters on those creatures. However, if you have infinite mana, you will probably win the game in other ways. Meister Seymour, one of the villains from Final Fantasy X. This is actually a very good card overall, not only for this deck, but for all decks with green there are +1/+1 counter teams. This 3-mana 1/3 has, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to Meister Seymour's power on another target creature you control. And for 5 mana, Monstrosity X, where X is the number of counters among creatures you control. So this card by itself can be a win condition with the amount of power it can add to the board by simply existing. Oaka Traveling Merchant, a 2-mana 1/2 with tap, remove a counter from a non-land permanent you control. Draw cards. Card draw and at the same time can keep our summon sagas for a little bit longer. Riku Resourceful Guardian. Whenever you put 1 or more counters on a creature until end of turn, that creature can't be blocked by creatures your opponents control. And still, 1 mana, move a counter from target creature an opponent controls onto target creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery. Riku is important on this deck for her first ability, as we can make one of our creatures huge and give a lot of damage to our opponents. The steal ability is not going to be that relevant the majority of the time. Shelinda Yvonne Acolyte, a 2-mana 2/2 with lifelink, and whenever another creature you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature if its power is less than Shelinda's power. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on Shelinda. Sin Unending Cataclysm, a 7-mana Leviathan avatar with flying and trample. As Sin enters, remove all counters from any number of artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Sin enters with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is twice the number of counters removed this way. When Sin dies, put its counters on target creature you control, then shuffle this card into its owner's library. This is a powerful finisher in this deck. As well as messing with our opponent's boards at the same time, we put a lot of counters in our creature's artifacts and enchantments. But the ability to remove from our opponents seems super strong, as a lot of commanders nowadays play with counters as well. Also important to note, Sin removes all types of counters, so he can also reset out sagas so we can keep them from longer on the board. Tidus Yuna's Guardian, the original face commander for this deck. Its counter synergy and draw engine all in a 3-mana 3/3 package. Probably the best card in the deck. Trommel Seymour's Butler, a 3-mana 2/3 elf advisor with each other non-token creature you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Also, 1 colorless tap. Proliferate X times, where X is the number of non-token creatures you control that enter this turn. Proliferate is so broken in a deck like this that makes cards like this and Lulu super strong. And for the last of Yuna's Guardian, we have Waka Devoted Guardian, a 4-mana Selesnya 4/4 with Reach, Trample. Whenever Waka deals combat damage to a player, destroy up to 1 target artifact that player controls and put a +1/+1 counter on Waka. Blitzball Captain. At the beginning of your end step, if a counter was put on Waka, this turn put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. Great card all around, plus giving extra counters always helps. Now we are going to talk about summons. Summons are a big part of Final Fantasy. In this case, our commander is the Grand Summoner, so we had to keep all the summons that came with the deck. plus added a few extra ones. Summon Ixion, a 3-mana 3/3 with first strike, Saga Unicorn with 1. Arrow Spark. Exile target creature an opponent controls until this saga leaves the battlefield. 2. 3. Put a +1/+1 counter on each up to 2 target creatures you control. You gain 2 life. Important to note, Yuna's ability doesn't care only about +1/+1 counters. The lore counters are also valid to add extra +1/+1 counters onto other creatures when our summons leave the board. In the case of Ixion, he also adds even extra +1/+1 counters, so it's even better. The other summons we also decided to run are Magus Sisters, Valefor, Yojimbo, Shiva, Fenrir, and Bahamut. The last creature we need to talk about, and that comes with the Precon, is Walking Ballista, a card that is very powerful and very easy to break, and in this deck is even better. Now let's talk about Sorceries and Instants. The deck comes with 3 board wipes. Damning Verdict, 5 mana, destroy all creatures with no counters on them. Most of the time this is going to be a one-sided board wipe. Promise of Loyalty and Farewell. For ramp we have Farseek and 3 visits, Inspiring Call with the best art in the deck. And for new cards we have Yuna's Decision, a 4 mana choose 1. Continue the Pilgrimage. Sacrifice a creature. If you do, draw a card. Then you may put a creature card and or a land card from your hands onto the battlefield. Find another way. Return 1 or 2 target permanent cards from your graveyards to your hands. Protection Magic. 2 mana instants, put a shield counter on each of up to 3 target creatures. Yuna's Whistle. A 3 mana instant, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in the random order. When you reveal a creature card this way, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, where X is the mana value of that card. For artifacts we have the usual mana rocks, Arcane Signet and Sol Ring with new arts. Also, we run Ever-Flowing Chalice. And Lotus Blossom, a great card in this deck as it gains counters, generates mana, and Yuna will transform those counters into +1/+1 counters once you break the Lotus. Blitzball Stadium, a new X and blue mana artifact with, when this artifact enters, support X. Put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to X target creatures. 3 colorless, tap until end of turn, target creature gains. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card for each kind of counter on it, and it can't be blocked this turn. As well as Strixhaven Stadium. Tap, add colorless, put a point counter on this artifact. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, remove a point counter from this artifact. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to an opponent, put a point counter on this artifact. Then, if it has 10 or more point counters on it, remove them all, and that player loses the game. Alternative win conditions that give a lot of work are fun, and this one is extra flavorful if you run the new art. Enchantments we run a couple. Bread for the Hunt, Hardened Scales, Inexorable Tide. The new Summoner's Sending, a 2 mana white enchantment with. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile target creature card from a graveyard. If you do, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Put a +1/+1 counter on it if the exiled card's mana value is 4 or greater. Graveyard removal, creatures, and +1/+1 counters sometimes. Great overall. Sphere Grid, a 2 mana green enchantment that looks like a new +1/+1 staple with. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Unlock ability. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have Reach and Trample. This card looks powerful, but probably is even better than that. We absolutely love it on this deck. Simic Ascendancy is another staple in the Counter Matters deck. But in this case, because of Yuna's ability, we can do 20 counters in no time. So even though this card makes us the enemy at the table, it's probably one of the best decks for it. For this precon, we decided to remove the following cards: Altered Eagle, Chasm Skulker, Duskshell Crawler, Generous Patron, Sunscorch Regent, Destroy Evil, Pull from Tomorrow, Fight Rigging, Path of Discovery, Ash Barons, Forge of Heroes, Temple of the False God, Bane of Progress. Not bad cards, but since we needed a little bit of space for some of the cards we wanted to add, something had to go. Lastly, we will talk about combos. Yuna Grand Summoner plus Freed from the Real. This combo doesn't create infinite mana, however, we can tap and untap Yuna over and over again, tapping her for blue mana and paying for Freed from the Real's ability to untap her. This makes it so the next creature we cast to enter with as many +1/+ counters as we want. So, if you want to finish the game on the spot, you just have to put a card like Walking Ballista into the mix and we can kill everyone. Another less immediate card we can add to the loop is Simic Ascendancy, as the creature entering will come with more than 20 counters, so our opponents only have one rotation before we win the game on the next upkeep. Another combo we have is Incubation Druid plus Freed from the Real, or Kami of Whispered Hopes plus Freed from the Real. Both work the same way. If either the Druid or the Kami have at least one +1/+1 counter, they can generate infinite mana by tapping for 2 blue and then using 1 blue to untap with Freed from the Real's ability. This is just infinite mana, doesn't win us on the spot, but is still a good setup that can be done with ease. It also helps that all of these cards are good on the deck regardless, so you don't need to add them to your deck fearing you will have a lot of dead cards in your hand when playing the deck. Lastly, we have a new combo with the new card that breaks Walking Ballista. Gata and Luzu plus Walking Ballista plus Hardened Scales. With Walking Ballista on the board, as well as Hardened Scales, you can use the Ballista's ability to shoot itself for 1 damage and use Gata and Luzu to respond to its ability. This way, every time Ballista deals 1 damage to itself, it would gain 2 +1/+1 counters because we also have Hardened Scales on the board. And because we are generating 2 counters and only losing 1 each time we activate the Ballista, we can get to the point that we have enough counters in the Ballista to simply kill our opponents on the spot. This concludes our deck for today. Let us know what cards would you add to the deck. The updated deck list is in the description below. If you would like to support the channel, please like and subscribe. And as always, see you soon!